The conversation starts now.
It's 4:20, time for THC Live.
THC Live. I'm Nikita Graham.
And I'm Shane Foxman. Thanks once again for spending some of your Thursday with us, 4:20 Pacific time. Every Thursday, we're bringing you everything you need to know as we move closer and closer to the legalization of marijuana in this country. Now, we always like when you take part in the show.
We do.
Tell them how to do that.
So we're going to ask you guys, if you're live joining us, you can comment and ask questions to all of our guests. We're going to open it up after each person, and yeah, the floor will be yours. So if you go down below, there's a comment section, put in your questions and we'll chat with you there. And we're also very excited to announce that we now are on a YouTube channel. So that is THC, one word, space TV, and that is on YouTube, where you can catch all episodes.
Yeah, all the different segments we run, our history lessons, our Canna facts, yeah, all the different things that you need to know. Speaking of needing to know, a jam-packed show for you once again today. Dr. Bryn Hyndman is going to join us in studio on the couch. What makes her interesting is...
She's a naturopath as well as an MD, and she's been dealing with patients for many years, and she's going to answer a lot of the questions that we have for her.
Just different things that come up time and time again. We hear a number of the questions coming from you. Hopefully the doctor will be able to shed as much light as possible. Also coming up on the show, speaking of dealing with pain and having doctors prescribe marijuana or cannabis for you, Matt Mernagh is going to join us from Toronto via Skype. He's been dealing with chronic pain, scoliosis, depression, a number of other conditions as well. We'll get into it with Matt, but it's been a lifesaver for him. He was prescribed opioids early on, didn't like the way it made him feel, didn't like the way it was making him live his life. Found cannabis about 20 years ago and has made that his entire life cause, trying to help change it and help other folks who are dealing with chronic pain. He's going to join us, as well as Anndrea Hermann is going to join us. We'll talk a little business when it comes to the industry of cannabis, and we're talking about industrial cannabis at this point. When I remember our first growing pains, we talked about how, in every province, coast to coast, 100 years ago, farmers were encouraged to grow.
It was mandatory, actually, in the 1980s.
You could pay your taxes in hemp. They wanted you to grow hemp. Then all of a sudden, of course, with the stigma, everything changed. Maybe, though, with the legalization, things are going to start to turn back the other way. We'll talk industrial hemp coming up a little later on the show. But first, as we mentioned, kind of our history lessons. Yeah.
Let's throw to this week's episode of Growing Pains.
Industrial cannabis hemp. It contains no THC and won't give you a high. Throughout the 1930s, Canada leads the way in hemp production for commercial use. But the ascent of Harry Anslinger and Charles Sharman is about to change that. Following passage of the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act, Anslinger bans hemp. He claims hemp farming makes it too difficult to enforce marijuana prohibition because his agents can't distinguish between the two.
I've got morons on my team.
Meanwhile, a February 1938 Popular Mechanics story details some of the 25,000 items that can be made from cannabis hemp, including dynamite, paper, insulation, plastics, a form of concrete, and biofuel. No wonder the article declares cannabis the new billion-dollar crop.
Show me the money!
Indeed, 40,000 of Henry Ford's Model T cars ran on hemp fuel, and it was Ford's ambition to build a car that was grown from the soil using organic compounds. This prototype car ran on hemp fuel and had composite fiber panels, a combination of soybean, wheat, flax, and about 10% hemp, that were 10 times stronger than steel at a fraction of the weight.
Nothing to see here!
Unfortunately for Ford, in August 1938, cannabis and hemp cultivation were also banned in Canada. Anslinger was appointed by his uncle, Andrew Mellon, owner of Mellon Bank, which is directly involved in Gulf Oil, now Chevron, ExxonMobil, General Motors, U.S. Steel, the world's first billion-dollar corporation, and DuPont Chemical. Pierre DuPont served as both chairman and president of General Motors. While there's no smoking gun of Mellon's direct involvement, and an alternative theory posits Henry Morgenthau Jr., FDR's Treasury Secretary, as the driving force behind prohibition for reasons of national security, there can be little doubt that the rapidly expanding petroleum, timber, and pharmaceutical industries are very happy with the bans. Instead of 25,000 hemp-related products, there will be 0. So much for the billion-dollar crop.
Ah, crap!
Until World War II. Uniforms, canvas, and rope are needed. Both countries reverse their bans. The U.S. even produces a pro-cannabis propaganda film, Hemp for Victory. After the war, the bans are reinstated, but that doesn't stop returning veterans from spreading marijuana use to their communities, a phenomenon we'll explore next time on Growing Pains.
So you learn something every week with Growing Pains.
I love it.
So if you want to check out past episodes, you're just finding us for the first time, go to YouTube, THC Live Space TV. We have all our old episodes of Growing Pains as well.
You can watch them all in a row.
Exactly. Binge watch.
Binge watch, Growing Pains. We're really happy to announce that we have Dr. Bryn Hyndman here. She's joining us in studio. And first of all, we're really excited to have you.
Oh, thank you.
And
thank you for having me.
To ask you the questions that people are wanting to know from a medical standpoint.
Yes.
And I guess we'll start it off with, how did all of this evolve and how did you get into prescribing medical cannabis?
Yeah, was that something you knew right away? You thought you'd prescribe?
It was patients.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It was my patients and almost any patients I saw at different clinics when I was a locum. People would come in and say, how do I access cannabis legally? I've tried it, it's helped for pain, or my friend's using it. Will you prescribe cannabis for me?
Now, we should mention you're a naturopath, you're a medical doctor as well, so an ND and an MD.
Yes.
So you understand plant-based kind of medicine,
Yes.
You understand Western medicine. Not everyone in your line of work is as open to the idea
Yes.
as say you are.
Yes, I've always been open to plant-based medicine and I use it and I see the effects. But what I didn't know, and I'd say what most physicians don't know, is how do we authorize cannabis? How is it done? What's the paperwork? What's the legal way? Because there's not training in that.
Well, that's a great question. So how does that work? So I'm one of your patients and I've got, whether it's, and I don't know what condition you have to have, but
Arthritis,
I've got chronic
knee pain,
of some kind.
insomnia.
Exactly. How would it work?
How it would work is I would do a history to understand the nature of your pain. And if you're my patient, then I would know about you, when the condition started, how it bothers you, what you've tried. And I do a screen to see if people have had addiction issues in the past, even though the likelihood of addiction is very low with cannabis. And I go over options and say, is this something you're open to? Or often they ask me. And I describe different forms of the medicine, and we start really low and we go slow. And I go over side effects they could have, which is usually a racing heart or feeling a little bit anxious or else groggy, like the stone feeling that they don't want to get. And then they try it, and then they come. We've got to follow up and see how things go.
Do some of your patients, do they come in kind of with an open mind, or when you've kind of put that forward to them, the cannabis side, is that something that people
so stigmatized? People will often say, oh my gosh, I smoked a joint when I was 18. Patients in their 50s or 60s, like, I don't want to get high.
Right.
Which is common. And the theme we say is it's not getting high, it's getting help.
Yeah.
And educating that we don't have to have what we call the psychoactive effect, like feeling groggy or stoned or lethargic.
So it's not the same joint that they're getting for medical purposes, for pain management, as they would the guy who's going out on Saturday night. Is it a different joint? Does it just affect them different?
Well, that's a very good question. So cannabis from a licensed producer, from a physician, is tested, meaning it's the same plant and herb, could be a different strain. The one you get on Saturday night would not be tested. We wouldn't know exactly what's in it or what strain.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's from a licensed producer, it's tested and we know what's in it.
Is the THC level different?
So yes, you can choose different strengths of the THC. THC is the psychoactive and CBD is more anti-inflammatory.
So that's what we were asking.
I was wondering,
can
can you kind of explain?
Because you see CBD pills and so what's the,
So one gets you high, one doesn't?
Well, so with all plant-based medicine, it's the interaction, it's called the entourage effect. So many different compounds working together produce the greatest healing effect, versus in synthetic pharmaceuticals, we isolate different chemicals to make a drug. Okay. So you never just get one thing in a plant-based medicine, but we would have a majority, an amount, a ratio of THC to CBD. And so traditionally, THC is what we test in urine, and it's what could give us a high, the psychoactive feeling. Whereas CBD is a really potent anti-inflammatory. So you think of an Advil or a Tylenol, that's an anti-inflammatory.
Right.
And so that's what the CBD is. But there's always a bit of THC, and we need some of the THC to make the CBD potent.
So there's pills, there's creams and
Christian.
ointments.
How many different things?
Yes.
You don't have to smoke it really for patients.
That's
right?
a very
You don't
good
have to
question.
smoke
It's
it.
becoming more and more common to do non-inhaled methods. So vaporization is the more safe form than smoking because you don't have as many toxic byproducts of actually smoking something. It heats it to a high temperature and there's no odor. So if people want to discreetly use or not fill a room, they will vaporize. But yes, we now there's oils and there's capsules and topical solves. Anything, an oral product that in oil or capsule has a longer duration of action in the body, whereas anything taken through the lungs goes into the blood quite quickly. It's like a rapid onset.
Can I go back to the
Yes.
CBD thing? I just wanted to ask a question about that. Can people function when they are taking a CBD pill to relieve pain or whatever?
Absolutely. Yeah, to be alert, to have cognition, to be able to think at their job, to respond quickly, yes.
So they can live a normal day-to-day life taking a CBD pill. They can drive a car. Is that all?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
and some people can tolerate small amounts of THC as well. It depends on the tolerance. Like if someone is drug naive or cannabis naive,
Yeah.
they are probably more sensitive. But it also depends, I think, a bit on what we call the pharmacogenetic effects. Like we all metabolize drugs differently.
So if someone gets a prescription, just for those that out there that think,
Yeah.
okay, I went to see the doctor, I have the chronic pain, I got my prescription, that doesn't mean you just go down to the dispensary at the end of your street.
No, this is another good question,
Okay.
which we all have to learn about because it's very confusing for
Yes.
doctors and patients.
difference, yeah.
So technically, storefront cannabis is not legal. So to walk anywhere and buy your cannabis is technically not legal. Decriminalization is happening, obviously, because we've got loads of dispensaries. And dispensaries will have products that Health Canada hasn't approved that patients cannot get from a licensed producer, like a topical solve for joint pain.
So that's interesting. So the place you prescribe, again, cannabis for my pain relief, if I go to the licensed grower, licensed supplier, only
Your options are
smokables?
few.
Well, they now have capsules and,
Okay.
and oils.
Oh, okay.
It took a while, but Health
Okay.
Canada's approved them, and we do. Yeah,
Because that would be key, because I imagine, as you said, some of your patients go, I smoked a joint when I was 18, I don't want that. They
Yeah.
would probably feel a lot better about taking a pill or putting on a cream. I would think.
Exactly, and doing it legally. A lot of people will present themselves saying, I self-medicate, I really want to do this properly or legally.
Right.
And the licensed producers, their cannabis is tested rigorously, so we know exactly how much THC, how much CBD, and mold content and residues, all those kinds of things. So it's a standardized product from a licensed producer versus a dispensary. That's what we call the black market. We don't always know where it comes from, and consistency can be hard. A person might get a product and then say, well, the product's not there in 3 months' time.
Right.
So strain-wise, are there different strains that are helping with different ailments? Are there...
Apparently, there's not much evidence for strains being that specific. Like there's indica and sativa, generally
Right.
the two main ones, and one is more sedating or calming, and versus one is a daytime one. But from what I read in the literature, in the medical literature, and from physicians who are very learned and they just do cannabis, there doesn't seem to be a lot of weight in studying the strains, so much as the different THC, CBD, and there's CBN. There's more and more cannabinoids that we're just discovering how they're working.
Are you surprised from when you started practicing to where we are now? How things have changed and how, there probably wasn't any dispensaries open when you started practicing.
Yes.
Or not as many as there are now.
Good question. Yeah, absolutely. Dispensaries are growing. I think questions about it
Oh, the
are
attitude
growing.
too. The stigma seems to be
The attitude.
changing a little bit too.
Yeah, and the climates are very different in Ontario, and my friends and colleagues in Ontario, I mean, as you know, probably the provincial police were, shutting down
Cracking
down,
dispensaries. And whereas here I know officers who were friendly with the dispensaries in Hastings Street and more questionable parts of the city where it's very amicable, and the city of Vancouver is certainly happy to collect business taxes from all these dispensaries.
Yeah,
I mean,
why not?
it's very confusing because nobody's going out of business here.
No, that's
In
why we're
BC,
here,
yeah.
because it is confusing. We're trying to cut through it all because
Yes.
you think it's illegal, but yet there's 32 stores on that one block right there.
Yes.
It's hard to get your head around.
Yeah. and they're in business. Mm-hmm.
A question about the medical side as well. So people can go into a dispensary and get a card.
That's right.
From a doctor. Is that a doctor, or is
that the same as seeing you?
Same as seeing, yeah.
That's a good question. No, I've heard, I know from my colleagues, naturopathic doctors and doctors of traditional Chinese medicine have been strongly warned that they're not allowed to authorize. And that's because, so it's a federal document when you give an authorization. It's a federal document and only medical physicians can authorize it. So if they do get a card from a doctor, that dispensary might have a Skype video consult service with a physician who does that. But that's not usually the case, I don't think.
Well, no, it depends.
It's hard.
It depends. You've heard a variety of stories. Some have a doctor on staff that just is there. So you go in and go, my knee hurts. Oh, well, if your knee hurts,
right. And then they do a quick
screen.
There's very few what we call contraindications in medicine, like reasons that we would say, no, you're not a good candidate. This would not be good for you.
Right.
There's really not many. It's a very safe medicine, and there's not many contraindications.
Where do you think we're moving to? It's hard to look into a crystal ball and see, but it's changing so fast. And it seems like it's an ever-changing kind of process as they kind of work their way through it. Where do you think we are in a couple of years? Are more and more doctors prescribing? Does it become a little more commonplace?
I think when the streams are really differentiated, when there is a legal recreational stream, I think the medical side will be even more regulated and accessible, because people will clearly want to know where to go when they're not going to a certified store that's legal to buy cannabis at, when they want professional help. There's not too many clinics, but you can Google and find clinics and physicians who authorize. So I think there will be a higher demand for physicians who do authorize cannabis, because there's still not many.
Well, no, and I'm thinking now there's probably the people who are doctor shopping for that reason alone.
Yeah.
I want to do it. I want to do it legally, because you can bypass the whole medical part easily enough anywhere in the lower mainland.
That's right.
You can just self-medicate. But as you mentioned, some people, no, I want to make sure I'm dotting the I's, I'm crossing the T's, I'm following those. And I would imagine they would have to doctor shop almost to find, if they want that. If my doctor for the last 15 years won't prescribe it for me because he or she doesn't believe in it, okay, well now I have to find a doctor that does, and it almost becomes...
Yes, and there's not a lot of time. The amount, it's because it's a passion for me. I've chosen and I want to learn more about it, but there's no training or continuing medical education. It has to be out of passion or will, I think, for a physician to want to learn about it.
Does it take a patient, we're going to get some questions from our viewers, but does it take a specific patient, and not as specific as you identify one, but someone who comes to you that, you know what, the other stuff doesn't work, they don't like it, and even if I've never prescribed it before as a doctor, I'm going to try this out with this patient. Does it take a patient to force a doctor to kind of outside their comfort zone, maybe? Yeah,
I think especially a patient they know and trust. Yes, that's often how we learn best, is we learn, patients teach us, or we learn or we hear stories and see there's something here.
Right, fascinating.
Absolutely.
So we do have a whole bunch of questions for you. This is going to be the first one, and it's actually something that I'm very curious as well, because there was some talk in the papers last year. So Anndrea asks you, the comment on use during pregnancy. Is this is, I know this has been kind of a topic that's a very good question.
Wow.
So, like a lot of medicine, drugs, lifestyle, and pregnancy, it's not something we study very much at all, because really who wants to be in the study group or the non-control group?
Right.
Well, let's just see.
Just go to my new baby.
Right. No, you know what? That's a super interesting point.
And I know some women who would have very small amounts inhaled for acute nausea in pregnancy, and they did that on their own choice and felt fine, and they've had healthy babies. But I can't comment on any evidence, but it's something that it's hard for us to ever find evidence on.
That's
and the worry is with the developing brain, THC and a psychosis link. Bottom line in anyone, that's why our colleges generally see 25 and under. Or else 18 years and under. That's where the worry is with the THC in cannabis, whereas other parts of cannabis are used for childhood epilepsy and cancer.
Yeah, totally.
Very,
a lot of cases
and
like that,
glioblast brain tumors, very successful, and that's more the CBD, but there is also the THC. So I kind of jumped ahead, but I can't speak. I wouldn't recommend it in pregnancy, but that's because I don't have the knowledge.
Okay, because yes, people are talking about it's helping with nausea and it's helping with all these symptoms, but I guess if there's not too much backing it. Okay.
That's interesting, yes.
So I have a question from Matt here. What about the effects of smoking marijuana? Is it harmful? Because a lot of people say one joint's a pack of cigarettes?
I have some colleagues who focus just on cannabis and have there's a bunch of research and evidence now that it's counterintuitive, but inhaling can be helpful for chronic lung disease and asthma. For what we call chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and asthma, it can actually increase like the lungs can open up more, and it can be healing.
And
it can improve outcomes in spirometry.
Because they talk about
in vaporized, and this is even in inhaled smoked forms. Wow. So I don't have the study to quote it. I know my colleague who does, but it's incredible if people do research the evidence that is coming out.
I would think that smoking a cigarette with all the chemicals and tar that's in that would still be worse than smoking a joint.
Absolutely.
I would think, like just the amount of stuff that's in it.
Yep.
That
absolutely.
But the carcinogens, that's what I'm wondering is just the.
I think
you're
it's over
smoking,
4,000
right?
chemicals in a cigarette.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the rough count. So we can't compare them.
Wow.
Dr. Hyndman, thank you so much for coming in
Thank you
today.
for
having
Spending
me.
some time with us.
Really
We
enjoyed
appreciate
being
it.
here.
I have a hunch that we will call on you in the future. Should
Yes.
a medical
Great.
question arise, you can be
Great.
our
We'd love to
medical
try and
expert.
help.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
Great.
joining us.
Thank you so much. Oh, no,
Thank
stay
you.
where you
Oh,
are. Stay where
yeah,
you
I
are.
can hang out for a little bit
Yeah,
here.
we're keeping with our medical theme today. As mentioned, coming up, we're going to be joined by Matt Mernagh via Skype from Toronto. He's been living with chronic pain for decades, and he's been using cannabis, and it's changed his life completely. He'll share his story. But as we said, it is a bit of a medical theme today. Today's Cannafax.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone, and our thanks to Dr. Hyndman for coming on.
That was so cool.
Well, and you know what's great? She doesn't talk like a scientist. She speaks in layman's
In
terms,
our
so you
language,
understand
yeah.
exactly what she's referring to. So our thanks to Doctor for coming on. I think a lot of people this week saw the Prime Minister talking. Again, it's been ongoing. We've talked about them gathering information at the Health Committee. The Prime Minister talking about the proposed federal taxes when legalization comes. $1 on a gram, that's $10, 10% on anything more. You know what, why don't we just hear from the Prime Minister and then we can discuss.
The proposal we put forward is a dollar excise tax per gram up to prices of $10, and then 10% on prices over $10 per gram. The proposal is to divide the revenue 50-50 between the federal government and the provincial government. The provinces argued that they are going to be bearing more costs, certainly up front in terms of installing the regime, and I certainly said we're open to looking at that and discussing and making sure that we are doing this right. But I emphasize once again that nobody's mindset on this approach is about bringing in tax revenue on this. The mindset with which we have approached the legalization and control of marijuana from the very beginning has been from a public health and safety standpoint, what we need to do to put in a system that will protect our kids, will protect our communities, and remove the black market from accessing the billions of dollars of profits that they do every year off of this.
That's the Prime Minister, of course, talking about the plans once decriminalization, legalization comes. I don't understand when he says the mindset's not to generate and collect tax revenue. Why wouldn't it be? That's the whole point.
That's a great point.
Isn't it? Like, I get you want to get rid of the black market, but that's the point. Like, there was so much money on the table. Where could this tax
Why don't we want to
dollars
use that? We should be using that for things that are productive, right?
No problem. And we've talked about this on the show before. My pet peeve, it should all be earmarked. Tax dollars from the sale of cannabis and marijuana should all be earmarked for specific projects, whether it's just for education, so parents don't have to raise money to pay for playgrounds at their schools, which is asinine. How about healthcare? And not just specifically for drug addiction, but for other things, hospital equipment. There's waiting list problem.
Roads even.
You have to tell people where the money's going.
Yeah.
And then I think when people see the money that's generated and they see what it's bought and what it's paid for, those that were opposed to it go, okay, I'm still not buying any, but I like this. I like where we're spending the money. I like where we're spending that tax
Otherwise,
revenue.
it's just an invisible thing, and it's just going to whatever it's going
Exactly.
to.
I don't want to know that it's buying more planes for the military. I want to know specifically. I don't want it in general revenue. I want it to know where it's going. I'll tell you what, we talked about it. The provincial government is looking for information. Can we get that address back up on the screen? If you want to let the BC government know what you think about legalization of marijuana and how you want to see it work. There's the website for you, the government. I think there's probably about, they were giving you a month, right? So we're probably
November 1st we have.
There you go. So 2 weeks to go. Oh no, a little more than a
November?
month.
Yeah.
You said it, so I'm going to go with it.
I believe it's
You said it
November
very
1st, yeah.
convincingly. So for now, we'll go with November 1st.
It was November 1st, I
If we
believe.
find out any more information, we'll let you know. And also we talked, look, the doctor talked about, kind of cutting through all the misinformation that's out there. We're talking about cutting through all the misinformation and confusion that's out there, but we're not the only ones. Business Vancouver. Let's get a shot of this.
Confusion.
Here's the cover. Cannabis confusion. Yeah. See, again, and this isn't High Times. This is Business Vancouver. That's the point. There's a lot of money at stake, and when there's a lot of money at stake, there's a lot of people interested in knowing exactly how it's going to work and where they'll have a chance to get their piece of the pie.
Yeah.
So it's not just, for those that want to be consumers, it's those that are going to be in the business.
It's impacting everything.
A lot of questions. We're going to be talking a little industrial hemp coming up a little bit later on the show. But now we're going to kind of keep with our medical theme. We heard from the doctor about prescribing it to patients. Joining us now via Skype, Matt Mernagh joins us from Toronto. Matt suffers from scoliosis, fibromyalgia, depression, seizures caused by an inoperable brain tumor. Matt joins us via Skype from Toronto. Matt, are you there? Matt, how are you today?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for inviting me on your show.
I'll tell you what, you look great and you sound great, and I'm sure as people heard me introduce you, and they go, scoliosis, fibromyalgia, depression, seizures. You look great, you sound good. Describe what it's like for those that don't understand what it's like to live a life in your shoes. What's it like?
Well, I manage my pain on a daily level, on a scale of 1 to 10, and, it's just a matter of managing my illness, like managing pain, managing by doing stretching, medicating with cannabis, and having a healthy diet. And I'm doing a lot. I feel a lot better these days than I have in a long time. So I'm quite happy to say.
Let me just ask you this, Matt. At the beginning, when you were first diagnosed or you were prescribed different pain medications, I'm assuming cannabis wasn't the first thing you received. What was it like at the beginning, and what sort of things were you given by doctors?
Well, we're talking late 80s when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and about 2 decades later with the schwannoma, which is the small brain tumor. But when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, it was very rare, and I was actually prescribed Demerol for chronic pain, which is quite an extensive and hard opiate. It's very addictive. And there was very little, I would say not very little. There was no talk about cannabis at this point anywhere. You didn't see it in anything, no media. So it was a journey through taking Demerol medication to cope with things like going to school, high school. I graduated high school with a prescription also with Demerol. Went to college. And it was in about second year college that I began to use cannabis, and quite taken by it. I fell in love with this plant. It's changed my life dramatically. It's been a bit of a rough ride at times with it, but it's been such a passion, and I've been so much outed, and I've spoken so publicly about it since 2002.
I have a question. So when you were originally taking opioids and things like that to manage your pain, and then you started self-medicating, after the self-medicating, did you go to your doctor and did you say, hey, can I legally get a prescription for cannabis? How did that kind of come about, and what was their response to that?
Well, I mean, I must look young. I mean, when I started, when I was 24, we're talking like this is like in the like Terry Parker. I know Terry. Your factoid was a bit wrong. It was 1997, not 87. But Terry, like these things, like there was no medical cannabis. There was no talk of medical cannabis until his court case. His court case, there was a big gray wall, an iron curtain over cannabis, and his court case was like a little sliver of light that penetrated that wall. And I guess from there, my doctor and they would have had Section 56, where you had to write to the minister, Alan Rock, to get a license. So there is no way they were going to give it to like a 25-year-old guy, So I had to, the first program they had like 3 doctors. You had to find 3 doctor signatures on an application from Health Canada. I swear it was that big. I'm not lying.
Yeah.
Then it went to like 2 doctors and then 1 doctor. This is years, right? Like this isn't like, hey, you got medical cannabis. Like I literally did not become a licensed in Canada patient until 2013.
Wow.
I've been growing marijuana illegally since I was 24 years old. I just got the paperwork finally from Health Canada that says, yeah, you're good to do exactly what you've been doing.
You know what? It's funny you talk about like the 1980s like it's the 1950s.
Yeah.
Like it's as you talk, come on, it was 1987. What did we know then? It's amazing how quickly things have changed. Did you know that immediately that cannabis was helping you, and you'd rather have that than Demerol or whatever else? Was it an immediate thing?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like it was like a light bulb went off in my head. It was like, whoa, what? Like, why did they keep this from me? Like it was like youth anger too. Like there was a lot of that involved. Where it's like, why was this even kept from me as an option? Like this is amazing. I can medicate when I needed to. It helped my symptoms. It felt like, wow, I was lied to, and it impacted my health. Thanks a lot, society. So it really became something to champion.
I'm going to say it became your calling.
Yeah.
It wasn't just that you smoke it and you go, oh my God, I feel so much better. But then you want to spread the word in a sense. And as we said, it becomes, your life. Tell us about some of the things that you've been going through. And as you mentioned, there's been hurdles and obstacles all along the way, but you've never given up.
No, I mean, it's been a blessing, really. I have a journalism diploma and I have a creative writing diploma, and both those subjects, like I'm a best-selling author because of cannabis and combining my love, right? So that's been a positive. On the negative, I've been raided like 5 times. I've spent time in jail. I spent 17 days in Toronto's worst detention center, the Dawn Jail, which they have since torn down. So that's on the negative. On the plus side, I started a rally in Toronto with others. I co-organized and led for about a decade, the 420 Smokeout in Toronto. That started with like 100 people maybe attended that rally, and 20,000 people attended it last year. It's unbelievable to see. Yeah, it's like that's when I was young.
Great picture. It's a great picture.
Right? It's not much of a journey. Like, yeah, the Toronto Star, like it's been a blessing, and it like I people look at that and they say, oh, the guy's having a lot of fun. Well, yeah, you have to have fun because like, yeah, you found a lot of great shots.
The Elvis and marijuana there.
I'll tell you what, Matt, I have one more that I'm curious about, and maybe we could put that one up and you could tell us what you were thinking on this day. We got that shot? Can Matty see it? Yeah. What were you thinking that day, Matt?
That's a thought picture.
Well, I mean, that day, this is a good story. Like that day, you wouldn't know, like I was really disabled that day. Like I could barely walk. Like I really hurt a muscle in my leg, my sciatic that day. So my whole left leg, like I was like really in a lot of pain. But this is for the Now, which is the Toronto Weekly Now.
Right.
It's, I guess, the Georgia Straight View in Vancouver. They came out with this Love Your Body issue for the very first week of January. And they asked people in Toronto to bear all, essentially. And they approached me. I've been writing for Now since 2002. I've been their cannabis correspondent in other topics too. It was a great journey with them. And they approached. They said, "Hey, will you come in and do this? We have this idea." And I was like, at first you're like, "Yeah, I'm a guy. I'll gladly pose naked for you." But it's like an hour or two later, you're like, what did I get myself into? Like, I didn't tell anybody, like, except for a few close people in my life. Hey, by the way, I'm going to go get naked for now. And 300,000 people on, like, the day after New Year's are going to see this. But the idea is, like, you should love your body. You should love what you do. Like, and I think chronic pain disassociates us a lot of times, like, from our bodies, because, like, man, I got pain. I don't want to pay attention to the left side of my face because, like, it hurts. Like, this hurts. Like, you mentally begin to block it out. And yeah, that's great for managing pain, but it's not so good for loving your body and getting your body to move. So you have to, I would think, I use mindfulness. I highly recommend it, in mindfulness and marijuana. So it's been a journey. It's been a great journey. You caught me at a good time. I've been kind of looking back because we're really approaching marijuana legalization. Just to put in perspective, in 2005, a group of friends and I took the Cannabis Control Board of Ontario. We created that by stealing the LCBO logo and switching it up. Right. And that was one of our marketing campaigns, right? And it's so amazing. Like, maybe I woke up in a different world. Like, my premiers, like, we're creating the Cannabis Control Board of Ontario. And in many ways, you're like I've been fighting since 2005 for this. Like,
well, that's what I was wondering. Can you believe where we are, considering, as you mentioned, your days in the Don jail, and that didn't stop you. And here we are. It's 2017, and hopefully in July of this summer, all of a sudden, the government passes the necessary bills. Can you believe what you're seeing?
Legalization 1.0 is what I call it. I think, it's an amazing start. Government has tried its best to do what it's doing, and we're going to have a long ways to go to get a system to work. And I'm happy to see it unfold. It is, it's not a perfect system by any means, but it's a system, like, even if it was in 2005 and the government said we're creating the Cannabis Control Board of Ontario, I guarantee you every cannabis enthusiast that I knew fighting for cannabis legalization would have thought it was the best thing in the world. And now it's sort of, jumped quite a bit ahead because court rulings, right? And my court case being one of them, RV Mernaugh, which really gives a lot of ground for these dispensary owners to operate, which is fine.
But what do you think? Aren't they going to only, the government in Ontario at least wants to have it, go through the liquor stores, the liquor branch?
Yeah, it's unfortunate in a way. I mean, it would have been better if they didn't spend the money on the brick and mortar retail outlets and focus maybe on online, and then simple licensing of the dispensary system they have here, at least in Toronto. And there's, we talk about Toronto, but there's a lot of small communities where they don't have any cannabis access. So
right.
It would have been more affordable, that's for sure. And it's definitely a long road to 150 stores in 3 years. I think you need that balance. I think it would have been best suited if you got an opportunity to work with the cannabis community on that front. On the other side, even if you didn't want them, you should have at least said, if I was the premier and the people involved, come get the jobs. If you're going to hire 500 to 2,000 Ontarians to work in the Cannabis Control Board of Ontario, they better have a lot of cannabis experience.
Yeah.
And the opportunity there to just undermine dispensaries by simply being able to afford bud tenders that are unionized, that are getting paid $26 an hour. Like, no dispensary is going to pay $26 an hour to a unionized staff worker, right? Like, hate to break it, maybe they are, I don't know, but
right, no, I hear you.
The Cannabis Control Board of Ontario is probably going to start at, right? So there's things that we can do to mitigate both sides. I don't see both sides like, oh, this is it, both sides warring at each other. No, the issue still is with the government, and we need to bring everybody together. And this is the first time, like we're a G20 country. Like no other district like in the world has federal legal cannabis. For July 1st, you're gonna have stores selling cannabis to people. Like it's on like.
Well, theoretically, we'll see how that plays out. And listen, Matt, I think we got a question from
We have
one
a
of our
few
viewers.
questions here. So Ingrid is asking, do people come to you for help getting off opiates because they know what a doctor would help with that? Oh, because they don't know what doctor would help with that. So are they coming to you instead of going to a doctor?
Just because of your experience, I imagine.
At one point they did, like for sure. When there weren't a lot of these services, I think there's a lot of clinics out there that are, you know, like they're better. I send people to clinics all the time now, but yeah, for a long time, like you get a lot of emails from people like, I'm trying to help, like get off opiate-based medications, or they're trying to get this way. And it's a long journey. Like I tell anybody, it's a long journey. Cannabis is something, it's a tool in your toolbox that helps you with these things. But I would hope that the clinics are there to help you. Right. So that's how I deal with that these days. I don't get involved. I'm like, I have clinics that I would gladly send anybody who comes across my email. That's where, you know, it's just easier.
Okay, let's ask Matt one more. What else?
We have one more. So Mike asks, once legalization happens, will it become easier to obtain for medical purposes, or will there still be hoops to jump through?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, like, there's a difference here. Like, I mean, I recognize the recreational model, but I'm a medical patient. Like, I get tax deductions by buying medical cannabis, right? Like, so I would hope that there's better access. I'm still like, I was sort of getting into this bubble of, oh, there's these clinics out there we can send you to via Skype. And I'm like, oh, it's getting better. Ontario, by the way, just allowed nurse practitioners to sign that federal document. So this is a great step. But there's still, I hear hurdles. I just heard a hurdle today from someone like, I can't even get the referral from my family doctor to the clinic that you would suggest. And I was like, oh, like that's like not good. Like, you know, like so there's still definite hurdles. No, I'm hoping.
Yeah, not every doctor is on the same page as well. We had a doctor on the show earlier, and not everyone in her profession shares the same attitude. Listen, Matt, we're out of time, but I want to say we appreciate yours. Thanks for spending some time with us and sharing your story, and we'll make sure we stay in touch with you as we move closer and closer to July.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. That's Matt Mernagh, again, joining us on Skype from Toronto. Suffers from a wide range of conditions: scoliosis, fibromyalgia, depression, seizures caused by a inoperable brain tumor. You heard him mention that. Sounds great, but again, it's helped him tremendously. And he thought afterwards, after he had that first joint, that first bit of cannabis, you know, why is this being kept from me? This changes my life completely. So our thanks to Matt for coming on the show. Thank you.
And next we are going to throw to something a little lighter called Lighten Up.
Soon, you'll be taking all sorts of measures to get your fix. People will start calling you names like Pothead or Smoky McBongwater. Losing all motivation, it's likely that you will drop out of school, take a sudden liking to sitar music, and maybe even get felt up by a cop or two. So why smoke grass?
I took it on a dare.
And if I dared you to jump off a cliff, would you do that too?
Man, everybody blows pot.
I know this one guy that doesn't. Wait, not that guy. This guy.
Oh, no, thank you. Not for me.
When I'm high, it enhances my creativity.
No, it doesn't. Look at these paintings. The artist was stoned when he painted these. Those don't look like real flowers. Is marijuana really where it's at? Is it really as righteous as you think? There is more to life than grass. There are fulfilling careers and groovy beach parties. The closer you look, the more seeds you find in your stash. Follow your hopes and dreams. Be someone. Do yourself and your country a favor. Don't let this happen to you.
Hello again. Next, we are joined by Anndrea Hermann, and
I'm still thinking of that Smoky McBong water.
Oh, Smoky McBong water.
Because you hear that all the time. The kids are always dropping that on the when you're out on a Saturday night. One of the more common nicknames. Sorry, I cut you off. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
Yes, Anndrea Hermann. Yes, the Ridge International Cannabis Consulting, the owner and founder, owner of Hemp Technologies Canada as well, talking a little industrial hemp. And we talked about this kind of in growing pains, just the different uses.
There's so many things, and since our growing pains thing, there's now 60,000 uses for hemp, and so it just keeps growing and growing, and so we're very excited to ask her some questions about
yes, Anndrea
the world of hemp.
Anndrea Hermann joining us from Skype from Winnipeg. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate your time today. Oh, can you guys hear? Because I can't hear. I have no idea. Can we hear Anndrea?
Sure.
Oh, there we
sorry
go.
about that.
There we go. No worries. I hear you loud and clear now. Thanks very much for doing this.
Thank you for asking me.
Let me just first off, how long have you been involved in, I guess, hemp and I guess, would you call it, is it industrial hemp? Is that the right term?
Yeah, industrial hemp or just hemp in general as a one-word usage. I have been now involved. I've been working in Canada now for over 17 years, and then personally been engaged in cannabis, first learning about industrial hemp. I'm from Missouri, and we were a famed state in Missouri, and we actually have something called the Battle of the Hemp Bells, talking about history, which is a sad story in itself, and it could have a whole clip dedicated to the Battle of the Hemp Bells, but quickly learned that there was more to the cannabis plant family than marijuana that I had initially been introduced to, and I learned about industrial hemp, and it just became part of what is my final vocabulary.
You bring up a great point. Just a lot of folks, I think of it all as one thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's part of the misinformation. Marijuana, hemp, it's just the same. Are they the same? First of all, are they the same plant? Is it just different parts of the same plant?
It's the same plant genera, so cannabis. So both marijuana and industrial hemp belong to the genera cannabis. And then really we function under a legal language that delineates what is classified as in hemp or industrial hemp versus what's classified as marijuana. So here in Canada, we have our industrial hemp regulations, and it defines cannabis sativa as having 0.3% or less THC in the flowering parts as being industrial hemp. Now, that's all grown underneath a pedigreed seed system. If you were to grow a cannabis plant in a marijuana program that happened to be 0.3% or less THC, does not make it industrial hemp according to Canadian regulations, because industrial hemp is grown in a pedigreed seed situation.
Wow.
I got confused right there. That seems, and that's probably part of the problem to begin with, because that seems a little cumbersome, to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is, surrounding around plant breeders and plant breeders' rights. So when you're actually developing a cultivar of industrial hemp, you actually have a protocol you have to follow. You have to be registered with the Canadian Seed Growers Association. You have to develop that cultivar to be uniquely distinct from any other cultivars that are listed on this list of approved cultivars. Now, in the marijuana side of things, there's not those same types of protocols. So you can have, people sharing their strains, and that's what they're called on the marijuana side, versus on the cultivar side as it pertains to hemp.
Wow.
It's
quite confusing.
It's fascinating.
So once cannabis is legal here in Canada, can we use the same plants? Can we also use the hemp as well as the bud?
Well, good question. Yeah, I mean, what's coming down the track right now with the Cannabis Commission, a lot of us don't know, as you were speaking earlier about, there's so much still left to be said, and how does hemp fall into this concept of the Cannabis Commission? And thankfully, I sit on the board of the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance, and members of our board are sitting and actually communicating as part of that task force with the Cannabis Committee, and really discussing how these new regulations are or are not going to impact our hemp regulations. Right now, to possess industrial hemp, viable industrial hemp pedigree planting seed, you must have a license to do so. So if anybody wanted to gain the right to possess or grow industrial hemp, they have to acquire a license from the Office of Controlled Substance in the hemp section to cultivate this crop. With that being said, we're not allowed underneath our current regulations to work with or harvest any of the flowering parts of the plant. So we cannot grow industrial hemp as a female-only plant to harvest bud, nor can we collect the chaff, which is what's left over after you would harvest, the grain portion, which is now going into the food, which is the dominant industry here in Canada for hemp. We're not allowed to harvest that chaff material either to do any type of extracting. So in a sense, even though we've become global leaders in the grain side, we still have a lot of blockage for us to actually advance the hemp industry.
So they're very separate then. That's kind of where we're getting at. It's two completely different industries.
Yeah, two completely different industries functioning under different regulations, and also a lot of different intended uses. Even though you want, as you were speaking with the doctor in the first segment about CBD, those both come from cannabis. So whether or not CBD from hemp or CBD from marijuana, it's still CBD. It's still the same chemical constituent.
What's the demand for hemp?
Growing exponentially. We've been seeing here in Canada alone, just on the food side, markets growing evenly for some years now at upward of 20% per year. We're seeing more companies come on board, more brands come on, and slowly moving from what would be a niche crop, which we still are, into something that's more mainstream. So it's not going to be like the hemp bar anymore. It's going to just be a bar called the Sunrise Bar, and hemp happens to be an ingredient.
What sort of things? Well, I'm just curious.
I was just gonna say,
food you talk about. What sort of things is hemp being used for?
Well, right now, like fashion. So my shirt is actually made out of hemp. Shampoo and soap that I all use today is made out of hemp. And not to mind on the textile side, but you're looking at interesting work going in nanotechnology. So you're looking at getting these very small particles out of hemp. You're looking at 3D injection molding, the use of hemp in building material for hempcrete. And then we've got things that are, for pardon the words, budding in the future. Would be looking at how can we do whole plant sequestering. So get the right here in Canada to use industrial hemp as a whole plant to do things like essential oils and different phytocannabinoid and terpene extracting out of hemp, in addition to really, as you started off saying, is like what we say 25,000 uses, and now maybe there's 60,000 uses.
That number is just crazy when you think about it. You okay?
Yes, just need a drink.
That's all right.
Some hemp juice or something.
Yeah, exactly. What are you having? What are you having? That's an excellent question,
cough
Nikita.
syrup or something nice, yeah.
Something in a Nikita, a hemp punch. Yeah.
Good old fashioned water.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Okay. Not as silly. Before we let you go, where do you see this going? As you said, it's growing. The needs and the desires for hemp and using it in an industrial way is growing exponentially. What do we expect in the next couple of years?
Oh, I see a lot. I see one, especially here in Canada, that we get fiber decortication, so that we're actually harvesting the fiber coming off the fields and then incorporating those into things like press boards, and I think we're going to start to see parts going into automobiles and things that we just don't visually see anymore. And people are going to start marketing this based not just solely on a little catchphrase that it's got hemp in it, is that you won't even know hemp is going to be incorporated into these nutritious, delicious foods that are highly functional, into functional products that are going into your automobiles or into your house, is incorporated into press boards that are going to put pressure off of our forests and trees, and in addition looking at the paper, nanotechnology, and graphene batteries types of products.
It seems endless, the
it's
possibilities.
fascinating too, the things that it's going to change. So
no, we appreciate it. Anndrea, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks for everybody. And don't forget, your voice is heard. So if you've got any comments, please reach out to the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance, reach out to your MPs, and for those not here in Canada, reach out to your local ag departments and, really have your voice heard by the power that you spend every day with your dollars and purchase some hemp.
Well, listen, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
you.
You have a great day.
You do the same now. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. That's Anndrea Hermann joining us from Winnipeg via Skype.
So many things that...
Interesting, it's in food, but it will get to the point where they don't even tell you hemp's in it anymore.
Yeah.
It's like nylon or something else.
Well, and the growing pains thing, they were talking about the vehicles and how
stronger.
The metal's stronger, or there's fuel, and so it's just going to be a natural thing that's,
Again, who knows how long we've been wasting time and not using this when we could have been using it. Our thanks to Anndrea Hermann, of course, for coming on the show. Matt Mernagh.
Dr. Bryn Hyndman.
Yeah,
as
Dr.
well.
Bryn Hyndman, MP, MD and ND, naturopath and medical doctor. It was our health show today, it seemed like, our health and business show. Next week, this is great. Dr. Catherine Kramer is going to join us. She's a vet. We're going to be talking about the possible use of medical marijuana for your pets. Interesting conversation. I had no idea this even existed until recently.
Well, if they're giving it to humans, why not give it to your beloved
pets?
Fur babies.
Yes, my cat's got chronic pain in his back hip. He loves his little CBD pills. We're going to take that's it. I was going to say a quick break. We're going to commercial.
That's it.
There are no commercials. Thanks very much for joining us. Episode 4.
We are live every Thursday at 4:20 Pacific time, right here at THC Live.
See you next week.
Ciao.